everybody. Welcome back to Through Thick and Thin with me, Rachael, the therapist, for episode 7. And today I have a guest that's different than my previous guest. I'm a bit excited to introduce Karly Lombard, RDN. So Karly owns Karly Rae Nutrition and Dietetics in Linwood, New Jersey. So another local person to us. And Karly and I have worked together professionally in coordination of care for clients and patients. So I wanted to bring her on today kind of to piggyback last episode with Alyssa mentioned her frequently in that episode and really discussed her own experience with seeing her for dietitian and nutrition work. So I wanted to bring her on herself to talk about what she does.
Thanks for having me, Rachael. I really appreciate you asking me to come on. And the episode with Alyssa was awesome. I listened to it. I am so grateful that she is so open about her experiences with working with me because she is so relatable with the way that she speaks. That it could be a calling to a lot of people to see how working with a dietitian could be beneficial to them, especially if they're having any similar struggles or can relate to Alyssa, in any way, shape, or form. So I'm excited about today too. Thanks.
Awesome. I had a few people reach out to me who were specifically interested in what she had to say in her episode. So I'm hoping that they take the time to listen to this episode as well. So just for people to kind of get a little bit of a background, I wanted to see what was your personal history with diet culture and how you feel that impacts your practice and the work you do with your clients.
Yeah, diet culture has been a huge inspiration to my practice and a big reason why I feel so passionately about what I do and a big reason why I do what I do and how I got into it. So, like most teenage girls, I feel like I started to have a big awareness about my body and feeling discomfort in my own body and my own skin, probably as early as elementary school and those puberty years. Just people teasing you and you just feeling like everyone's going through these weird, awkward changes. You have awareness with, boys and sexuality and all this kind of pressure to fit in. So I feel like my history with diet culture started back then. I actually remember the first diet I went on. I was about 11, 12 years old. And it was printed in like a Cosmo or 17 magazine. Younger generations probably know what that is, but that's what we were grabbing at the grocery store and sitting around the pool reading, right? And it was like a lettuce and Diet Coke diet. And I did it for about 3 days and I felt like garbage. But I somehow still felt like I was accomplishing something, like getting that positive reinforcement for following what I thought, these muses to me were these supermodels, doing this Diet Coke and lettuce diet. So going off of that ended because that was not sustainable. But the feelings of inadequacy, were still really there through most of my teenage years. I felt like diet culture not only impacted, my view of myself and my self-esteem, but also the relationships that I developed with other people and how I spent my time. I feel like I really wasn't developing authentic, deep friendships with people. I wasn't pursuing things that I wanted to pursue because I was so consumed with my appearance and the way I fit in throughout those adolescent years. So fast forward to how I got here today and how that influenced my practice. My mom is a registered nurse, and she actually introduced me to what a registered dietitian was. So I always knew that there was nutrition influencers out there, and obviously there was nutrition blogs and stuff, but I didn't really know that there was a specific title in the medical field that made you like a doctor, if you will, of nutrition, right? You are the expert in the field to help people. So I thought that was really, really cool and interesting. And I went down a rabbit hole of how to start feeling professionally. I got really into running, and I started to think more about not so how much nutrition and what I ate, how it made me look, but how it was going to make me feel during performance. So I went into the field of nutrition. I never looked back. I studied that all throughout college. But going back to diet culture, I still, despite all of the wonderful things I was learning about in school, I still felt pressure in those areas, in diet culture and self-acceptance and, how I wanted to apply the principles of what I was learning to my own self. And I actually saw a lot of the same behaviors amongst a lot of my peers in the field too. I think being students and taking information in these little clusters before you can actually learn how to put them all together and become a clinician and see where you want to go. I saw those behaviors amongst a lot of us in different ways. And so when I was in my dietetic internship at Pepperdine University, we were introduced to intuitive eating. And that was when everything actually felt like it clicked. And I was able to apply, the principles that I was learning about in intuitive eating to my own self. And it was really, really cool to be, at the end of my education about to go into the field. And here I am still learning a lot about myself and my own nutrition journey and how to make peace with food. What I saw in myself is my motivating factor to help people in that way too. I completely and totally transformed my own relationship with food. Obviously, healthy choices was second nature to me. So that part wasn't something that I necessarily felt like I needed a lot of help with navigating, which is overwhelming in itself. But I
Mm-hmm.
finally was at peace with my body, with my weight. I felt like I could fully just let go of any kind of like pressure or overwhelming thoughts surrounding food. I finally had that peace. So that was really long-winded, but I feel like like so many of us, it goes all the way back years and years and
Yeah.
years, to those elementary school days. But that's how I got here. And, like today we talk a lot about Instagram and social media and the
Mm,
heavy influence that has on the youth and even adults. And um, I do feel like every generation has had their struggle with diet culture. I don't think anyone necessarily has it worse. What I do feel like is our generation probably consumes the most of it, and it's really, really hard to disassociate and disconnect from a lot of those influences out there. So I feel like it's really, really nice for people who do pursue working with a dietitian, who do come into my doors, to be able to feel like they have some peace of mind, that they do have somebody who they can finally get clarity from and sift through all of that misinformation that's out there.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And that's something, you know, talking about the technology piece and the influence from media. I
Mhm,
talk a lot about, or I talk a lot about this to my clients about how, I guess more our age, yes, we were heavily influenced with like magazines and movies and
mhm,
television, but now the access to this all the time on
mhm,
social media and with the filters and the photo editing, it's really hard for people to distinguish what's real and what's not. And then we have like, or they have these unhealthy, unrealistic expectations of what a body, especially a female body, should look like. And then the self loathing comes in when they don't
mhm,
meet those expectations, when it's, you know, me looking and having the conversation of like, this is not real life. This
mhm.
is a very easily edited app.
I
So,
also feel like it's really hard when somebody's already in that headspace, that
yeah,
deep level of comparison, to something that might not even be real. I mean, especially with the AI world, things are just getting completely and totally crazy. It's
yeah,
hard to talk them out of that rabbit hole, though. Like people get really, really defensive and fixated on almost wanting to be in that place of self-loathing and not coming
yeah.
out of it. It's really, really sad to see, but yeah, I do definitely agree. It's everywhere, and the amount and the types of ways that we can be influenced is really, really, really overwhelming and crazy.
Yeah. So, I work in, I'm sure the listeners or viewers know, like I work with a lot of clients from a psychotherapy realm. So
Hmm.
I think the coordination of care is really important when I have clients that come in with disordered eating, body dysmorphia, especially restrictive or binge eating behaviors, and I refer out for coordination of care. I think that treatment team modality is super important for a sustainable recovery. But just for anybody who has no idea, and it's kind of like a selling point for me with my clients, like what is the structure and layout of an appointment with you if somebody comes in to work with you? What does that look like?
So that question has a little bit of gray area because it really depends on the client. So I'm not like a factory here. When you walk in, I don't just do the same exact thing with every single person because
Sure.
everybody has a different history, a different goal, and some things are going to work better for one person than they do the other. I'm sure it's very similar with you too. You're not going to do the
Yeah, of
same
course.
exact thing with each client, right? But some people have a misconception that it is the same, and you walk in and you get this pretty meal plan and you exit, but no, not so much. So a lot of times we do a discovery call first, see if we're a good fit. Once again, like I'm not a factory here. I'm not here to sell you something. So if I don't feel
Hmm.
like I can provide what you need or I'm an expert in your area, I send you in a different direction. If you do have a history of disordered eating, I don't think it's important. I think it's absolutely necessary that that person is working with a therapist first and foremost, being overseen by a physician, and then also working with myself. So that is a prerequisite for coming in these doors if you are dealing with a history of disordered eating. But usually we do, a dietary recall sometime. Pause. Okay. All right. Um, so usually somebody comes in, we go over their past medical history. We talk about their past diet habits, what they want to focus on that day. I'm very client centered, so they're in the driver's seat of, their treatment plan and how we're going to go about helping them. So a lot of it is, what's most important with you today. If we're talking about somebody who has a history of disordered eating, we're taking a much, much, much gentler approach with nutrition therapy. I'm talking heavily, heavily about the relationship with food, talking about, what we're fearful of and working through the actual nutrition education component to help them understand, the mechanisms of food and how food works within the body. That goes hand in hand with somebody who's not in that position. So if somebody is coming into my doors, a lot of times they're very, very surprised by the heavy education component.
Hmm.
They're not really expecting to almost feel like they're in like a classroom, right?
Yeah.
So things do operate, open conversation. But like Alyssa said, I'm, up, I'm drawing things, I'm writing things out. We're not just sitting still. We're doing a lot of different things and activities. So I could be helping you make a grocery list. I could be writing out different meals that we can incorporate for your week, helping you apply the education component to your everyday life. I don't just give you a handout with some education and say, okay, like now go apply this. It's no, like, how are we going to put these goals into place? How can we help you identify barriers and, maneuver them and put things into place to help you get past those? So I'm really, really passionate about, deep conversations in here and actually like hands-on tackling the barriers that are going on to helping you or to hindering you making changes, as well as a lot of nutrition education. So we talk a lot about the science behind food. I want you to graduate from my practice. I don't want you to have to keep coming here for forever. And I want you to be your own dietitian. So I want you to be able to go into a store and be able to sift through everything and understand why you're making the choices that you're making and be able to put everything together on your own. You shouldn't feed me, for forever. Maybe that's
Hmm.
not the best business model, but it's what I want, for my client.
Yeah, it's interesting when I've discussed some of the format with my clients who work with you, and it's like I like hearing they're almost surprised when they're like, I'm learning all these things. She has the whiteboard. I'm learning what a carbohydrate is, which, especially with, you know, when I refer to you, it's normally people who have the disordered eating behaviors and history. I think there's a lot to say with when you have agency and you have a lot more knowledge behind your choices versus, just looking at somebody and being influenced by like what I eat in a day type of
Hmm.
thing and have
Hmm.
no idea what is influencing their behaviors or blah blah blah. So I think for my clients it gives them a lot more sense of relief and control, which I mean, at least in my therapy sessions, we talk about control all the time. And
Of course.
so,
Yeah. And somebody who, so like what you said about how when you have someone who has a disordered eating background, a lot of times they have or think that they have like this wealth of nutrition education, and they really feel like they're an expert because they want that control and, they are making the decisions and they tell themselves, like, I am right and this is what I need to do to accomplish what I want to accomplish, whatever it is. Similarly, somebody who's not in that seat, the education component is so lengthy and deep for both, because you have somebody who's a clean slate coming in knowing nothing. And then you have somebody who thinks they're the expert of
Mm.
everything and really they're not. But the tone is usually a little bit different. So you're still going backwards and dissecting, the whys behind certain things. And you're not pointing out that someone's wrong, but, no, like we could really maximize this area because, but I feel like when you're dealing with a disordered eating, it's a little bit of, like you're almost defending your title and trying to show them like the why, like, no, like this is really, really actually harmful, for our
Yeah.
bodies, while keeping a positive tone, being inspiring and like, you can do this and this is why. But yeah, nutrition education, man, it's it's
It's
so important and we don't get enough of it. Don't even get me
yeah.
started on that. But why
Yeah.
don't we all know all of these things? Like,
I know. Yes. Yeah.
um,
And it is interesting too when I have the clients, especially the clients who think that they know like what they should
mhm,
and shouldn't be eating, and I have them write out a list of their food rules
right.
and these rules that they've created over time, and me gently challenging them on
Mhm,
why this is fact versus this is something they've been taught or this is something that they have conditioned themselves to believe of, like, not eating after a certain time, or this is
mhm,
healthy and this is bad, and without any guidance from like a registered dietitian nutritionist, this is just what they've picked up as a fad diet or something that their
mhm.
parent does or whatever it is. So I think almost the unlearning is just as
But
hard as learning.
yes, that's what I mean. Like when you are dealing with somebody who has all those food rules and these misconceptions, you feel like you are like going up against this battle almost, because this person feels so safe in this little bubble and you're trying to let them know that there's like, a whole entire bigger, better way to live in a much safer bubble that they can be in. But it takes some convincing sometimes, right? And there's successes and failures, but we just keep working through it. And people who are in that position, uh, it's interesting to see the differences and variances because it's really, really not cookie cutter, right? We might
Yeah.
have similar symptoms, but when you get down into the food rules and all of that stuff, some people walk in my door and they want to tackle what they're most afraid of first, and some people are the exact opposite. So, once again, it's not one size fits all, and here you have to kind of meet people where they're at. And I have to be a skilled physician. Oh my God, a skilled clinician. I have to
Oh,
be
yeah,
a
good.
clinician, and be able to, handle that and be able to maneuver myself whenever I need to, because you never know what's going to come out of somebody's, mouth, or the questions they're going to ask, or, where they're going to be that day. So,
And that's really similar to what I do, and I think that private practice role of that clinical work is you never know what somebody's going to bring to session. You just have to be ready to adapt and be flexible with that. And
mhm,
so I know you started talking about your treatment approach with clients who come in with disordered eating, and like we've discussed, it's not like one size fits all, but is there a specific intervention that you feel like you really like implementing with
mhm.
clients who have a history of disordered eating, or is there just a specific intervention that some clients with disordered eating seem to benefit from?
Mhm. So I feel like a journaling component is really, really beneficial to clients. I feel like being able to not only think about what they're doing as far as fueling goes and what they're putting in their body, but focusing a lot on the aftermath of that. Not only is it beneficial for me, but it's also beneficial for them to take back to their therapist as well. There's like a really, really like fine line of scope of practice when you start talking about that relationship with food when you have someone who has disordered eating. Um, Other diagnoses tend to overlap. So it does become challenging, but I do feel like the journaling component is really, really huge with dietary recalls. One thing that I never, ever, ever, ever do with my disordered eating clients, any kind of like nutrient tracking. But once we do get to a certain point, I might talk about like submitting photos of certain
Mhm.
things for me. Depends on the client once again. But that's really helpful, not only for them to feel like the wins of applying things to that they're learning to their everyday life, but it also helps people see areas that they think they might be doing really well in, what's actually lacking. So if you're feeling like somebody's really, 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 I'm picking a random thing, like not eating enough fat, right? And they're like, no, 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 like I do, I do, I do. if you're able to not only, let them see themselves and make up their
Yeah.
own decision on whether or not they are or aren't, that's really, really helpful. So journaling, I do a modified version of food journaling sometimes. And then also a lot of small goal setting. So old school nutrition therapy for disordered eating is like a catastrophe. You have these dietitians who were prescribing somebody who was struggling to eat an apple, 4,000 calorie a
Yeah.
day diets, and a lot of times not even caring what that diet consisted of. It's like, of course, they're not going to be successful, right? That sounds horrifying to somebody. It sounds horrifying to me. I can't even
Yeah.
imagine, being in that person's shoes. But small goal setting. So thinking about like what our bigger picture is and dissecting that into little stepping stones, helping them give all of that chaos that's going on in their mind. Like these people are exhausted. Food takes up every
Yes.
single thought all day long. Giving that chaos and that anxiety, like something small to try to focus on, to get to that bigger long-term picture that they can't even like fathom right now, is really, really helpful with helping people with disordered eating, make some headway.
Yeah. Two things came up for me while you were talking. One is the food logging and the journaling aspect was I've had some conversations with my clients where I find it really interesting of once they are asked to, bring some self-awareness to this, they're like, I had no pictures to submit to Karly because I didn't eat all day. And it's one of those things where they didn't even realize they didn't eat all day
Mhm.
until they went to look at this app or whatever
Mhm.
this journaling diary is, and they're like,
Mhm.
"Oh crap, I haven't eaten in the last." So I think that is really helpful just to like one bring the self awareness for
Mhm.
them because these habits have just been going on for so long.
And I do say it with the disclaimer of this is very, very client specific. Like there are many
Yeah,
people who are not going to be ready for something like that, or that might be very, very triggering
yeah,
in a different way for them. So it's not something that's necessarily recommended to everybody. But if somebody is
sure.
in a certain point, and they're willing, it's never like a requirement. You have to do this if you want to come back for your next session. It's never like you didn't do your
Hmm.
homework kind of reaction. It is just for that accountability component. And also, it helps people really, really see where they're struggling. So, I didn't eat that day, right? Like, I didn't have any photos. Like, that brings some self awareness, but it also opens up the conversation when that person's back of, okay, well, like, what's been going on? And
Hmm.
why do we feel like we're not prepared? Are we too chaotic? Are we avoiding planning meals because we're not in the right headspace yet to apply nutrition education to our everyday? And we have to kind of shift and go back to the relationship with food, and talk more about that to get us to a point where maybe we're ready to apply some of that nutrition knowledge. You can't walk in with the expectation that you're going to go through 3 sessions and have a perfect relationship with food and your whole entire diet's going to be changed. It's a much, much, much slower pace, in here, because these things take time. We've all lived, however many years that we've lived and developed all of these habits and
Exactly.
nuances surrounding food. Like it's not going to be undone in 3 hours worth of sessions with me. I wish I could snap my fingers, but it's magician, not dietitian, right? Um, so yeah, it's really, really, really interesting to see how people respond to the different techniques and different therapies and recommendations. But those things have been really, really helpful with those types of clients. So I'll keep doing.
And I did want to touch on something that you mentioned, which I think is so important. And just like therapy has a bad rep, just like, I think unfortunately in every field where you work with people, there's good clinicians and there's clinicians that maybe should be working in a different field or have a more updated treatment model. So I
I mean, not
am
everyone's good at their job, Rachel.
yes, yes, right? Surprising. So I am so picky with who I refer to because unfortunately, just like anywhere, you have these horror stories of these clients who come in and they're triggered or a clinician that isn't like doesn't have the education of eating disorders or disordered eating. Same thing with therapists, right? So I just think it's so important that for people, I always promote like looking for a clinician who has this history or has this education, and they promote that, and it's a good fit for you.
Mhm.
So normally I say, take the recommendations I give, or, if this seems like a good fit, go look at their webpage, go, look at the work that they do, look at their blog or whatever it is. And because I never want to cause more harm.
Of course, yeah, and people will often, like, you talk to friends and stuff all the time who say something like, "Oh, I saw a therapist and it didn't help," or "I talked to a dietitian before and they didn't know anything, they didn't know how to help me," and
Yeah,
it's a lot of times just, like, you didn't talk to the right one maybe for you,
exactly. Yeah.
and you need to date around sometimes and find that, perfect match, and sometimes I'm not it for people, and I have
Hmm.
no hard feelings, and I'm sure that's happened to you too, where, you
Yeah.
just don't jive with somebody and there's no momentum there, and that's okay too. It doesn't mean that it's a fail. It just means that, maybe my techniques aren't what that person's looking for, and they're not going to benefit from that right now, maybe down the road.
Yeah. And a lot of the times it's, if there's one bad experience of no matter what it is, trying to get the people to be open minded, because if they sought out help initially and didn't receive it, they probably still need that help.
Mhm.
So getting them to be open minded enough to at least give it a try. Um,
Mhm.
but having that education, I think, is super important.
Well, and there's always multiple ways to get somewhere too. So it's important for clients in any field to understand as well. And I always, always, always say to people over and over again, if this doesn't work or if you don't like this, there's another way to get there.
Hmm.
But you have to let, me know, or we have to
Yeah.
see and, make changes as we go. But if somebody comes one time and they didn't like something, they don't come back and it didn't work
Yeah.
for them. It doesn't mean that there wasn't, it's a little bit short-sighted.
Yeah. So, what do you think is one of the most beneficial components of a client working with a registered dietitian nutritionist who struggles with disordered eating?
My gosh, okay, well, there's 1,000.
Yeah.
Um, two things that immediately come to mind. I feel like everyone and everybody is, or everyone and anyone is the food police, these days.
Mm,
Everyone's whether or not you're consuming things online or talking with friends or whatever, everyone knows everything about nutrition because we eat all day long, right? And you don't need a prescription to go to the grocery store. So I feel like with somebody who we've talked about, their mind is so overconsumed with the thought of food. If you have a really good rapport with that client, and hopefully you do if they're coming back to continue seeing you or seeing me, they have a person, they have that solid person who they can rely on to sift through whatever is on their mind. So I guess what I'm trying to say is peace of mind, right? And support. So they have that support system in place for them. They have that peace of mind, somebody who they know, even if they can't wait to get in the door after that week goes by, they can run in there and just kind of like, bleh, like, they know
yeah.
what's going on and know that they trust the response from me, from myself, which is great. It's a nice, it's a nice relief for that person, right? The other thing though is obviously my education. So having somebody that they can trust, give them expert nutrition guidance so that when they do encounter those food police, they do encounter that misinformation online, they have the reinsurance, they have the education themselves to be like, nope, that's not true. And, this is why. I feel like both of those are imperative for the healing of somebody who's going through that for sure.
Yeah, I think having that support is great. Like, I know from my own personal experience and from working with clients, just struggles with disordered eating and your body, especially anything that has to do with your body, can be so isolating and shame based. It's not something that is as openly discussed. I mean, I think it's coming out more recently, but people really, like you said, just spiral inwards, and it's something they're constantly thinking about but never vocalize.
Hmm.
So I think it is super important, and we talk about positive supports a lot of the time in my sessions. Like, at least if you have one person, if that's me, if
Hmm.
that's Karly, if that's, your friend who also has a positive outlook on things. Like, I don't care who it is, but I just want you to have one person to talk to about these things.
Yeah, I mean, it's so easy to, like you said, spiral into a place of self-loathing and to just feel super, super depressed and like nobody can understand you. So when you're given that validation of why what you're going through is so hard, but then also that inspiration of this is how you can feel more supported and helped and not alone, um, that helps a person feel like, okay, like I can be more present. I can come back into myself. There is hope, right? I don't have to feel completely and totally distracted and
Mm.
disassociated from everything around me because I feel like nobody could possibly be hurting, as much as I am or feel as, not worthy of happiness as I do. And it's nice to be able to be the person to give that to somebody. It's a positive motivator in my career, right? I'm
Yeah, it's
sure
great to
you feel
see
the same
that.
way.
Yeah. Yeah, see that change or planting the seed.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give someone who is fearful or reluctant of working with a registered dietitian nutritionist?
Never judging you. So, I mean, the right clinician is never judging. I'm never judging you. I feel like to come in as honest as possible. You don't have to put on a show here. So just being your authentic self,
Mm.
talking about your problems openly, trying to be as vulnerable as possible is super, super helpful being on my end. I know that that might not happen right away, but hopefully we do get to that point. And then to keep an open mind, honestly, just understand that all of your misconceptions or beliefs about food, they might not go away right away. You might be reluctant to trust, but just really trusting the process and having an open mind, trying to commit to making those changes to be able to see the benefits. Um, I feel like people who aren't successful, or who feel like it's not for them usually probably didn't give it a try, didn't
Yeah.
have an open mind and came in on the defense, right? My job isn't to prove to you, why I'm important, right? It's just to give you what I know. So I'm not going to sit here and battle with somebody back and forth who's not going to have an open mind. At the end of the day, I want what's best for everybody. Whatever makes them feel good is what makes them feel good. But if they continue on and they're not feeling well and they felt like this wasn't for them, well, I mean, I think it's a lose lose situation, right? So having that open mind and understanding that there's nothing you can say in here that's going to make me
Hmm.
think differently of you. Um, is a way to enter a session, with a dietitian.
Yeah. I hear a lot too of, you know, I already know everything. Like, what are they going to teach me? I hear that a lot. So what is your response to someone with that mindset?
Well, I feel like people who have that mindset aren't walking through my door, right? But in the community, if I was out at a lunch or something and I heard someone talking like that, I'm very, very particular about food policing. So I probably wouldn't say much of anything um, until that person was ready, because I'm not going to fight somebody. Whatever makes them happy, happy, if they think that they know everything. But if we reference back to the episode with you and Alyssa, um, she's wonderful, right? Like I told her she has a well balanced
Hmm.
diet, da, 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 but she openly says, "Well, I'm having some IBS stuff," right? But in her head, like she did feel like she knew a lot, right? But that only
Yeah.
got her so far. Like she still ended up walking into the door, and the conversation is, "Well, you do know a lot, but this could be better, right? So let's talk about that."
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm very much so not, I will not make any commentary on anyone else's nutrition when it's not warranted. If somebody was a client and they felt a certain type of way about something, I would provide them the education, right? I would say, well, this is, what I believe, and this is what the science believes. But at the end of the day, if that's how you want to go about it, there's other areas that we can talk about too. Very, very respectful in that manner of people's preferences, but also letting them know what, I think is best when it is warranted, of course.
Sure. And I think too, it's where I work with a lot of clients who, um, yeah, struggle with the disordered eating for a while or have some history with like addiction or things like that. So yes, a lot of my work is meeting people where they're at, and sometimes, like, once that rapport is established, I say, like, I give them a little bit of that push to just go, so
Yeah.
it's that challenging of, like, if I thought that you knew everything, or if you knew everything, why would I be recommending this to you? Or,
Right. Yeah.
even if you go through the door and you only take one thing away from it, right? Like, what is the harm of taking one
Mhm.
thing away that you didn't know? So I am like a broken record sometimes with my clients who I really think that support and education would be beneficial, but they're just maybe not ready, or they're not ready to be vulnerable with somebody else.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
like these tiny pushes to slowly get
Uh-huh.
them in the door.
Yeah.
But
They might
um,
not realize that they have a barrier yet either, but the best is when you get to backtrack a little bit. So if that person keeps coming back and they keep having
sure,
the same problem over and over, and
exactly.
it might be because they didn't want to make a certain change. I love and live for like that aha moment where they're like, oh, right. Maybe it is that. And you have to go back and say, well, I know we talked about this months ago, but
Hmm.
is it time to revisit thinking maybe we need to make some adjustments here?
Yeah,
Right. That is like when they put it together.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
very, you have to be patient with it, right?
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of these things take so much time, because yes, and I think it is hard where people come in and it's not like a quick fix. This is, like you said,
No.
deep rooted from a young age, a lot of different factors and layers of things that we're working through. So,
Mhm.
but it doesn't mean that people won't get there eventually.
No, of course. It's a journey. It's not like you said, a quick fix. It takes a lot of time and patience and dedication, right?
So, if people are interested in working with you, how do they go about that? You're fine.
You can go to my website. It is karlyrayrdn.com, and you can just click submit an inquiry to me. That will just shoot me an email, and I'll get back to you that way. Or you can reach me by phone. You can call or text at 609-402-5276.
Awesome. And I'll try to link that information in the description of the episode. So if people are interested, they'll have those resources if needed.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rachel. This was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Karly, for coming on. And thank you, everybody, for listening or viewing. And keep an eye out for next episode, releasing the first of every month. Thank you.